Today's video is about the concept of the faithful and discreet slave class. This is a very important concept for Jehovah's Witnesses because Jehovah's Witnesses are constantly told that they need to trust in the faithful and discreet slave, and that is the class of persons that Jehovah is using today in order to guide his people. Now, if you ask the average Jehovah's Witness who the faithful and discreet slave class is, many will confuse the concept of the faithful and discreet slave with the governing body. Many will say, oh, it's the governing body. The brothers who are in Brooklyn, composed of maybe 9 to 12 spirit-anointed brothers who guide the worldwide work. But the official definition of the faithful and discreet slave is not the governing body. It's actually all the anointed persons who are on the earth at a given time. At the current moment, about 10,000 people, or very close to 10,000 people, partake of the emblems, and therefore the composition of the faithful and discreet slave could be up to 10,000 people. But when the Watchtower says the faithful and discreet slave class has decided, or the faithful and discreet slave class says something, they're not referring to all 9 or 10,000 anointed persons. They're referring to decisions that are made administratively in Brooklyn Bethel. Now, when I went to Gilead, I was very concerned about this topic because since I had been at Bethel before as a Bethelite, I knew that the faithful and discreet slave as a whole, all the anointed on the earth at a given time, were not involved in the decision-making process. I knew that only the governing body and their close associates, many who are of the other sheep, are the ones who are actively involved in making decisions. In fact, the writing department is composed almost exclusively of brothers who are of the other sheep, who are not of the anointed class and therefore cannot be part of the faithful and discreet slave. Yet these brothers are the ones who are actually writing and dispensing the spiritual food that Jehovah's Witnesses read. Since I knew that, when I went to Gilead, I was hoping that this matter could be cleared up. In fact, I was expecting that at some point new light would appear and Jehovah would explain that the faithful and discreet slave class actually does refer to the governing body. When I was in Gilead, there was a talk given by Brother Barber who prepared a talk called The 1900-Year-Old Faithful and Discreet Slave. I looked forward to this talk because I thought, here's an opportunity to get the answer from the horse's mouth. I can get the answer from a member of the governing body himself, Brother Cary Barber. Brother Barber at the time was almost 100 years old, could not walk, had to be wheeled in. His discourse was actually given as a manuscript discourse. He read off the information and then he left. But the information that he presented explained who the faithful and discreet slave was over the past 1900 years. And he explained that in the early 1880s, it was thought that the faithful and discreet slave was in fact Pastor Russell. And at the time of his death, Pastor Russell may have thought that he was in fact the faithful and discreet slave, and this idea was promoted in the Watchtower magazine until the late 1920s, at which point the current understanding of the faithful and discreet slave came into being, where it refers to all the anointed persons on the earth at a given time as a class. However, the society calls the faithful and discreet slave a 1900-year-old faithful and discreet slave, as if this slave has existed without break in the past 1900 years. In fact, this is something that Brother Barber explained, that for the past 1900 years there have always been members of the faithful and discreet slave class here on the earth. However, Brother Barber did admit that there is actually no historical record of the faithful and discreet slave for the past 1900 years up until the 20th century. To make the claim that there has been an unbroken connection of humans who form the group, the faithful and discreet slave, for the past 1900 years, without providing a shred of evidence to back it up, is an extraordinary claim, and it defies reason. In fact, Brother Russell, Charles Taze Russell, when he came on the scene, he did not connect with any pre-existing group of faithful and discreet slave persons. Rather, he did his own independent Bible study and thought himself that he was a member, or he was himself, the faithful and discreet slave. So as I went to Gilead, the concept of the faithful and discreet slave not being the governing body really made no sense to me, because I knew that in reality it's the governing body that makes all the decisions, whereas in the publications it's claimed that the faithful and discreet slave does that. Brother Barber explained that the faithful and discreet slave was represented in the first century by a governing body. And the faithful and discreet slave today, likewise, is associated with a governing body. Now, there are issues with the concept of the faithful and discreet slave referring to a group of Christians, because Jesus does not even explain who the faithful and discreet slave is. If you look at the verse, Jesus merely asks a question: who really is the faithful and discreet slave whom his master has appointed? Jesus does not give an answer. Jesus does not say, it's all the anointed on the earth at a given time, or it's Brother Russell, or it's a group of persons in Brooklyn, or any other answer. Jesus merely asks the question, who really is the faithful and discreet slave? So if Jesus declined to define who the faithful and discreet slave is, well, it really goes beyond what is specified in the Bible to claim that the faithful and discreet slave is associated with a particular organization or person today. Now, as I mentioned, Brother Barber indicated that the faithful and discreet slave needs the governing body in Brooklyn in order to be its administrative body to make the decisions for the worldwide work. I'll talk about this on my next video, about the origins of the term governing body and how it's not a biblical term at all.
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.